And I think by having both an advocacy and an adoption team together under one roof, it really creates this synergistic relationship where adoption is the on-ramp to advocacy. As more customers become adopted, by default, they want to become advocates. But at the same time, those advocates want to share their story, their experience. Now, to take it a little bit step further, there's other ways that you can leverage your advocates today. So whether you're looking at, getting feedback on your product roadmap, if you're looking for help around your go-to-market strategy, if you're looking for, especially if you're going through an M&A experience, these are all ways that you can tap into your advocates to find out what is ultimately the voice of the customer and what's going to move the needle and what's going to drive awareness from some of your initiatives and ultimately create social proof and how that can make inroads to things that you're working on specifically. To give it a little bit more context, I want to give you an example specifically from one of our best advocates. Her name is Jessica. And as you can kind of see from the slides here, she actually started her career 15 years ago as a cancer biology student at Stanford. And one day she decided to make the shift in the career into marketing operations. And she met some of her colleagues and friends, and they told her about all the great things you could do with MOPS. And she got really passionate about that. And she ultimately became an expert in all things Marketo. And then she wanted to become a Marketo Engaged champion, as well as a user group leader for us. And these are programs that existed for 10 plus years. And she was there at sort of the very foundational elements when this product and this career was really kind of transforming what the marketing operations professional was all about. And then a couple of years ago, I actually spoke to her. She was one of the first real customers that I spoke to really think about what are the programs that we want to be known for, how do we transform our current landscape. And she really helped us reimagine what does that customer experience look like for Marketo, then ultimately for Adobe down the road. And then she also spoke at some of our summit conferences over the past 5 years. She ended up winning what we call our Marketo Engage Revy Award. And then more recently, when we went through the acquisition from Marketo to Adobe, she actually spoke main stage on our summit conference to kind of rally the troops and drive the passion around why Adobe's continue investing in the marketing automation space. And she spoke with some of our executive stakeholders at Adobe. And then today she went from an individual contributor to now a senior director of demand ops, and incredibly proud of her journey and what she's been able to accomplish. But Jess is also just one example of a number of different situations, as you kind of see from these slides, of how some of our customers have really been able to see the impact that our programs and our technology has been able to do for their own careers. And I think it really comes down to how can you create ultimately these magic moments that are going to drive deeper impact, build the relationship, and ultimately create community for your customers. So that's the second thing that I want to cover from community and advocacy. The third pillar, which I think is also just as critical and foundational to everything else, is about adoption and customer retention efforts. So when I think about this, it's really about value realization. It's how do you drive deeper product maturity, and how do you reinforce learning so at the end of the day, your customers understand when they go through their onboarding experience, what are the exact things that they should be implementing? What are the things that they should be avoiding? And what are the pitfalls that other customers have gone through that they can learn from through that experience? And I think by having both an advocacy and an adoption team together under one roof, it really creates this synergistic relationship where adoption is the on-ramp to advocacy. As more customers become adopted, by default, they want to become advocates. But at the same time, those advocates want to share their story, their experience. And so we've actually used our advocates to help fuel our adoption programs and actually create content. And I'll give you a playbook exactly how that works and how you could put it together. And having built really those two things under one umbrella drives the greatest impact for customer experience. So when you start to think about, building a scalable customer adoption framework, always think about it from the customer lens. How does it start and end with the customer? And what is it that they need to be successful? So if you break it down into its components, it's looking at these 5 different stages. The learn phase is kind of understanding what are some of the program requirements? What is it that we want to actually create that's going to be helpful for the customer to drive deeper product maturity? And then this is also the most critical phase. It's actually listening and having those informational customer interviews and talking to your customers to map out what are some of those paths to success that they found and what are some of those pitfalls that they could avoid. And then the third phase is actually creating that content and developing those programs, whether it's a nurture program, an in-product guide, or something like that. And then being able to deliver that in relevant places, exactly where the customers need them. And then simply being able to measure and continue to optimize that journey so that you're making improvements along the way. So to give you a full-blown example, if you're, for example, you wanted to create a customer adoption program, and specifically a series of email nurtures, you can think about it from 4 different angles. The first one would be like an onboarding nurture, where you're thinking about what is the first 30, 60, 90 days that a customer needs to learn. What are some of the tips and tricks to help them with their implementation, et cetera? And then as that customer gets a little bit more familiar, what are some of the a little bit more advanced tools and skill sets they should be aware of at that point, all the way to the time that they're more of a mature customer, or maybe they've been using it for a number of years. And what are some of those additional tips and tricks to help them be successful and get more value from your products and solutions? And I think once you've done all those 3 things, it then lays the foundation for being able to convert these customers into those raving fans, and then have their permission to be ultimately be able to cross-sell and upsell them on future products once they first seen the value. Now, in terms of other ways, there's in-product guides that could help along that journey, especially when they're inside the product and playing with it every single day. And then in terms of the content examples, what does this actually look like? Well, it could be in the form of interviews and surveys. It could be email nurtures. It could also be video content that you filmed, and also blogs and user-generated content that other customers can learn from. I think what also makes this really helpful, especially when you think about adoption and advocacy together, is that when you have your advocates front and center speaking the same language as your customer, they're more likely to engage with it than it is if, let's say, an Adobe employee like myself were to share, what are some of the things that they should be learning to do. If they hear directly from the horse's mouth, that's when it creates greater impact. And even though I said that there's actually 3 different things that are foundational for a customer success function to really be operational, I really think there's a 4th one. And I try to say that this is more of a bonus, but I think it's a must have. And it really goes back to being able to measure impact and unlocking more budget and headcount at the end of the day.